Hey guys, happy hump day. Sorry, I'm a little bit of a mess. I just worked out. I have no makeup. My room's a mess. I wrote my notes for this video on a receipt, but so much about this business is doing things imperfectly. Doing things imperfectly is still progress. So, wanted to start off with that message that I just wanted to get the response back to Heather. I thought you asked a great question. So, Heather's question to recap was, here's a big problem I've been having, and I actually think it's kept me from moving further than I am and have with Beachbody. I feel fake whenever I message people, even if it's just to say, hi, how are you? I feel that way because I probably wouldn't be messaging them if it wasn't for Beachbody. I don't know how to get past that feeling. Very common problem, Heather. So do not feel weird about this at all. I'm glad you asked this question. I'm glad you brought it up. And I made a list of 5 things that I think are common reasons people might feel this way and what to do about them. So after I go through these, if maybe you can give me a little more information on which one of these you might be feeling, or if there's one that I haven't touched on, and that will help me answer it for any of you guys who might be feeling that way. But first off, what I want to address is what you said about, I think it's kept me from moving further than I am and have with Beachbody. Yes, 100%, 1,000% it has. So our confidence in what we're doing, in our services, how we're talking to people, our confidence in ourselves, that is always projected energetically through any kind of messaging we're doing or any kind of talking we're doing with prospective clients. So hands down, any kind of limiting beliefs are things that we have to work on. That is stuff that you have to get past if you want to do well in this business. On the surface, your activities of how much time you're spending messaging, how much time you're spending posting, all of those things can look the same as somebody else's, but somebody else can be successful if they are confident and you are not. So much of that energy and passion behind what we're doing is always communicated. So I absolutely agree that if you're feeling that way, that is something that can absolutely hold you back from being more successful, but there are always ways to work on things. So it's important that you're always plugging into these groups and calls so that we're constantly honing our skills. So I'm really proud of you for sharing what you're struggling with, because that's the first step. The only way to get better and to work through these things is to acknowledge them and then get help with how to move past them. So congrats for that. That's definitely a big step 1. Okay, so feeling fake when you're messaging people, I understand, because I definitely used to feel this way, especially in the beginning when I was first coaching. I made a list of 5 things. So the first thing that I think is common for why people might feel fake is the lack of belief that the person they're talking to or prospecting truly wants or needs what you're offering. I think that is a very common thing, is that we often feel like we're bothering people, or they may not want or need what we have, and we're trying to force it upon them for our own agenda. But how I want you to reframe this is that, first of all, that's 99% not the case. Think of all of our coaches, even just in this group. Think of how your life is different because somebody asked you if you were interested in trying a workout program. Think of how your life is different because of these products. Think of how your life is different because of these challenge groups and the support we have to offer. And think about how every single person in this group has been affected positively in that way. So I think reframing it to remember that we offer truly potentially life-changing things, that to me is something I wouldn't want to hold back from somebody. I love the phrase, don't keep somebody else's destiny trapped in your mouth. So that's saying that somebody else's life could be so much better if they knew what we had to offer, if they were plugged into the challenge groups, if they had this way to connect with people and make healthy changes. But if your fear is holding you back from sharing it with them, you are potentially keeping something that could be life-changing for them stuck inside of you because you're afraid just to ask. Think about that. So if they're not interested, or if it's not for them, they can always say no. Go for no, use that mentality, but just know that for the percentage of people who are going to say yes and really do want and need it, it could absolutely change their life. So do not let the fear that you might be bothering them or that they don't genuinely want or need this be something that keeps you from at least asking. So that is myth number 1, or thing number 1, reason that you might feel fake, is because you might have a lack of belief that they don't need or want this. But think of how many lives it has changed, and think of specific examples. Think of yourself, think of the people that you care about in this group, and think of how all our lives are different. And I think that'll really help. So that's the first reason you might be feeling fake. And as I go through these, try to make mental note of whether that's something you relate to or it resonates with you or not. The second thing, the beat around the bush mentality, I guess. I used to feel fake if I was messaging people because I really wanted to ask them about a challenge group or see if they might be interested in coaching. But I was just starting with, hey, how are you? How's life? What's new? And I was kind of beating around the bush, as I said. I think that felt fake because I wasn't being direct with what my real reason was for messaging them. So Heather, this might be something you relate to, especially because you said you probably wouldn't be messaging them other than because of Beachbody. So there's nothing wrong with being direct. And that was something that I had to force myself to try and just know that it might be uncomfortable and know that some people might not like it. But then the amazing part of that was the more direct I was, the more people responded. I think there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I don't know if you're interested or not, but we have this new challenge group starting and I thought of you and you were on my mind and I just want to see if this might be something you would be interested in learning more about. Being direct like that, sometimes for me then, what was shocking when I started doing that is I felt so much more authentic because I was getting right to the point. I wasn't dancing around it. So that might be something that you might want to try too. And a lot of times you won't know how easy it actually is or how effective it is to actually be more direct until you just force yourself to try it. So it took a couple of, weeks of experimentation and some uncomfortable messages that I had to write that I didn't think would be well received for me to get over that fear. And then it was amazing how well received it actually was. And people responded really well. And in turn, I literally haven't looked back. It's a more efficient way of communicating. I'm not wasting my time. I'm not wasting their time. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not forcing them into anything. I'm just saying no pressure, but here's this thing I think you might really connect well with. And you've been on my mind and my heart. Just wanted to see if it was something you're interested in. So try that. So that is number 2, is the beat around the bush mentality, and erasing that by just being more direct, forcing yourself to just jump right into the point and not be shy about that. The third one is the lack of the belief in the product or the company. So is there anything about these workout programs or nutrition programs that you are afraid isn't going to work? Obviously, if you've been a coach for a while and you're using the products, I know you guys all believe in the products and you've seen what amazing differences they can do. I know I don't have to say this, but we all know they work. So I'm really not worried about that. For any of you guys in here, you wouldn't be coaches if you didn't think they worked. But so I did notice in the past that sometimes I would feel like I knew they would work for me, but I would sometimes worry, like, are these going to work for other people? Are they going to be able to stick with them? But you really can't worry about that because that's not under your control. That is something that we can help and encourage, but not everybody that starts the program is going to stick with it, and that's okay. But the point is you have to know and remember that these products do work. And I believe in the company, I believe in the workouts, I believe in the nutrition products wholeheartedly. And so it is very easy for me to sell them because I would want to tell anybody about this just like I used to tell people about new classes at my old gym, just as excitedly. And there was nothing in it for me but that. I was literally just saying like, hey, there's this new kickboxing class. You guys should come. It's so much fun. Let's all go together. And so I sort of think about that when I'm pitching the products for Beachbody, because if it feels the same way, if it's just something I'm excited about, I want to share that with other people, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But just remember that if for any reason you're doubting the products, be a product of the product. Make sure you're as dedicated as you can be to the workouts and the nutrition programs. And then also make sure you're reading a lot of those success stories on teambeachbody.com. That will remind you of how life-changing this can be. So the third one was the lack of the belief in the products or the company. But that's a pretty easy fix for us. The fourth is lack of belief in your coaching. So this was something that I remember going through maybe year 1.5-ish or 2 of my coaching. was I started to worry that, okay, if somebody signs up with me, am I really going to be able to deliver the best services? Because I think at that time I was feeling pretty overwhelmed, and I was just worried about it. The solution for me was to run more challenge groups. So once I got in that system of having regular challenge groups, I didn't worry so much because I knew there was always something to plug prospective clients into. So now we have that all taken for you, because remember, we always run groups as a team. So even if you're running your own groups, that's totally fine. I encourage that. But if you're not, we always have that group every single month, the 3-week health and fitness group and the free challenge group that you can plug prospects into. So you don't have to worry about believing in yourself as a coach and the services you offer, because you always have that to fall back on. So we can always work on improving our skills as a coach and how we're communicating with people and how we're motivating people, but you always have that to offer. So don't be afraid of believing in what you have to offer as a coach, because we're all in this together. So that was the fourth one, was lack of belief in your own coaching. The fifth one, and I think the most important one, is lack of belief in yourself. So this could sort of encompass everything we already talked about, but it can also be a lack of belief in your communication skills, lack of confidence, and that you're even worthy to reach out to people. There's so much depth to this topic that I can't even cover it in this video, but this is why personal development is a must. If you guys had any idea of how much personal development I do, even when I was still at work, when I was still at my old job and I was working full-time, even really before starting coaching, I was always plugged into stuff like that. I would always listen to audiobooks in my car. I devour stuff on YouTube that is all stuff that's going to speak to my mindset, my spiritual beliefs, my confidence. And the cool part about Beachbody, what I've always loved about it, is it's sort of this playground or arena where I can try out what I'm learning in my personal development, and there's not going to be any life or death consequences. So if I want to work on changing my mentality and see how that's going to affect things, I can see that pretty immediately in my business. So if I work on something for a month, and then I can typically start to see the results, and I can always course correct as I go. So being plugged into personal development for me is something I would guess loosely I'm probably doing 3 to 4 hours a day of. So oftentimes that's overlapping with when I'm getting ready in the morning, I'm listening to stuff. When I'm working out, I'm often listening to motivational stuff. When I'm driving, I'm listening to audiobooks. When I'm cooking, when I'm cleaning, anything like that. And typically before bed, I'm reading or listening to something else. Now, these could just be a bunch of quick YouTube videos. Maybe I'm binging on Marie Forleo or whatever it might be, or Gary Vaynerchuk, Chalene Johnson. This might be podcasts. This might be anything that's just really lifting me up and inspiring me and motivating me and energizing me. I'm listening to stuff like that constantly all day long. And this is not just because I'm a full-time coach. This is something I used to do and find ways to fit in even when I was at my full-time job. So it's not always easy to push play on that, but now I'm so addicted to it, I literally can't go without it. So I'm just like, more, give me more. That has changed. I've changed so much in the last 5 years that I've been a coach because of how much I'm doing that. So that is the thing, that if there's any kind of doubt in yourself, I don't know how else to tell it to you. You have to be plugged into that. If you have any kind of meditative or prayer or spiritual practice, be doing that too. That, I think, is the key. You can always hone your skills, but that belief in yourself and in life and what's possible is something that really needs to sink in, and you have to constantly be refreshing yourself of that. So every single day, it's an absolute must. So personal development. So I'm just going to recap real quick. The first one was lack of belief that they need or want what you're selling. Do not worry about bothering them. There may be some people you're bothering, but that's okay, because there are going to be people that this could change their life. So think about how all of our lives were affected positively because somebody was brave enough to reach out and just talk to us about it. The second one was the fear of beating around the bush and how that causes us to feel fake. Just be more straightforward. Practice being direct. I want you to send your next 5 messages very directly and see how that turns out. Lack of belief in the product or the company. If you're doubting this at all, be a product of the product. Make sure you're really dialed in, and make sure you're going to teambeachbody.com to read the success stories. We know these products work, so just make sure you're really in tune with that by being the product of the product yourself and reminding yourself of how these work for other people. Lack of belief in your coaching. Remember that you always have something to provide because we have those monthly groups each month. But you can also work on honing your skills as a coach just by listening to stuff you see on YouTube from other coaches, how they communicate with people, stuff you see from me in our groups, the national wake-up calls, stuff like that is always refining our skills as a coach. But if nothing else, you do have those groups to fall back on. And then the fifth was lack of belief in yourself. Personal development. I don't know how much I can emphasize that. That is what is going to change your confidence in time. You must be plugged into it always. Even when you don't want to, just let it play in your ear. That's all I can tell you. The confidence is key. So how you're communicating energetically, how you're communicating with confidence is going to absolutely affect your results in this business. Think of if I just told you the same information, but I was kind of like, well, maybe you could try this. Would you believe me as much as I'm saying, here's what I've done, here's what's worked for me, here's what you need to do? That is communicated whether you realize it or not. So that is the key thing that you need to work on, is that belief that you're worth it and you have something to offer, because every single one of you has something important inside of you to offer. You all have a unique story. You've all had unique struggles, and you've all had ways you've overcome those, or you're working on those, or you're making progress. Share that journey with others. It is your job, and you are here to be a light for others. So don't worry as much about the business. I don't want you focusing on the nitty-gritty of how you should word things. Just channel in to being the light for somebody else and showing that you care, and that will make the biggest difference of all. And then it will also boost your own self-esteem so that you can get out there and do more of that, because that's what we're really here for. Remember, we're called Team Inspire for a reason. I want you guys to be inspired so you guys can inspire others, because I know you're making such an impact on the world. And I truly believe that is how we create a kinder world, is by empowering others to know that they are worthwhile and to know they have something to offer. And that starts with knowing that you yourself are worthwhile and you have something to offer, as every single one of you do. So I am so grateful for all of you on this team. You guys are all amazing. You keep me inspired. You give me such joy in my life. So if you're ever doubting if there's a reason for you to be here or not, make sure you know I see you all, I care about you all, and I am beyond grateful than you can even imagine of how you're all here and in this, and we're all in this together. So you are important, and I am talking to you. If you're listening, you have something to offer, so don't ever, ever, ever doubt that. I hope those tips helped. If you resonated with any of them and you want me to elaborate more on any one of them, please let me know. Or if you think there's something else you're struggling with that's making you feel like you're coming across as fake when you're talking to people, let me know, and I'll be happy to make a video on that too. Hope everybody's having a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.